profession is emerging. Unofficial, uncensored, and unstoppable. It's called macro-whistleblowing, the practice of exposing not scandals, but systems. Not one corrupt official, but entire architectures of betrayal. The profession and practice of macro-whistleblowing. This digital booklet defines a missing field in democracy, where public memory, sovereign speech, and system-level truth-telling come together. Not journalism, not activism. A new kind of civic duty. Read it, share it, teach it. Macro-whistleblowing is not an act of rebellion. It is a discipline of exposure. A profession devoted to identifying and revealing how entire systems, policies, and ideologies are engineered to disempower the public under the illusion of progress. This booklet introduces macro-whistleblowing as a civic and intellectual practice distinct from investigative journalism or traditional whistleblowing. It is not concerned with catching individuals in wrongdoing. It focuses on the design of dysfunction itself. Across 5 seminal position papers, the field is defined, defended, and contextualized. It clarifies its role in restoring public memory. It establishes its independence from media frameworks. It situates macro-whistleblowing as a missing safeguard in modern democracies. And it calls for institutional recognition of this practice as a legitimate form of truth work. Macro-whistleblowing is the lost chapter in democratic self-preservation. A profession for our times, forged in conscience, and grounded in civic duty. This powerful manifesto defines macro-whistleblowing as the missing profession in modern democracies, one that speaks not from permission, but from conscience. It separates systemic revelation from journalism, defends the role of forbidden memory, and dares to proclaim speech as sovereign, sacred, and unstoppable. Through 5 electrifying position papers, this booklet gives voice, structure, and legitimacy to those who expose the machine behind the narrative. If you've ever felt that the lie is not a glitch, but the system itself, this is your field. This is your language. This is your fight. Introduction. Beyond the office. Whistleblowing is often boxed into the narrow world of leaking memos, exposing fraud, or testifying against corruption inside an organization. But a far more powerful and far more dangerous form of whistleblowing exists, the kind that speaks against entire systems. Not a manager, not a CEO, but the machine itself. This is macro-whistleblowing. Macro-whistleblowing is not a job description. It is not signed off by HR or protected by law. It is the sacred act of standing up against a government, a political ideology, or a national policy that deliberately crushes its citizens, mentally, economically, and spiritually. This paper is for those who refuse to be fooled by slogans and false dreams. It is for those who expose the deeper rot, those who say not just someone stole money, but this entire system is designed to keep us poor, broken, and silent. What is macro-whistleblowing? Macro-whistleblowing is the act of revealing structural systems of oppression masked as policy psychological operations aimed at weakening citizen agency, economic sabotage packaged as transformation, historical lies passed off as national truth. It is rooted in a love of people, not a love of power. It is powered by conscience, not contracts. Macro-whistleblowers don't leak documents. They write books, produce documentaries, start channels, and post truths that pierce illusions. They aren't just calling out a bad apple. They are ripping open the entire rotten orchard. Why macro-whistleblowing matters in a failing democracy, in a healthy democracy, media, opposition, and public inquiry. Act as checks on government abuse. But in a dying democracy, like many post-revolutionary states, the system eats the whistleblower and rewards the lie. Truth becomes treason. Patriotism becomes propaganda. Citizens are fed narratives to keep them docile. In such climates, macro-whistleblowing becomes a national emergency act. It is the siren when all others go silent. Those who reveal how the state manufactures poverty through bad economics, silences whistleblowers through assassinations or fear, lies about history to control identity, uses race, class, and ideology to divide and rule, are not traitors. They are the last loyal citizens. The tools of the macro-whistleblower: you don't need access to confidential files. You need pattern recognition, seeing repeated abuse dressed as policy moral fire, the will to speak, even if no one claps public courage, to publish, speak, and stand in full view, strategic storytelling, to turn cold facts into piercing truth. Macro-whistleblowers use books, blogs, YouTube, community lectures, and podcasts. Their weapon is public education. Their armor is credibility. Their battlefield is the mind of the people. The price: macro-whistleblowing is costly. There is no severance pay, no media sympathy. You are called bitter, radical, extreme, or ungrateful. You may be monitored, isolated, or ignored. But history shows that all real change, from prophets to rebels, reformers to revolutionaries, began with those who dared to shout truth into a system built on silence. A call to writers, thinkers, and witnesses: if you've seen the lies, if you've traced the patterns, if your spirit is uneasy with what you know, the system is hoping you stay quiet. Don't. We are not here to please power. We are here to free the people. Every piece you write, every truth you speak, every post you dare to publish is not mere commentary. It is resistance. It is revelation. It is macro-whistleblowing. Let the journalists cover the scandal. Let the analysts dissect the numbers. You expose the machine. Final word. This is people's capitalism. This is the prosperity code. Macro-whistleblowing is not just protest. It is the beginning of alternative nation building. It says, we see the lie, we break it, and we build from truth. It belongs to the sovereign citizen who refuses to kneel to ideology. It belongs to those who believe in people's capitalism, in communities rising not by permission of the state, but by the will of the people. Let the system tremble at those who still think, still feel, and still speak. This is the new vanguard. It's prophetic, civic, and revolutionary, and far more dangerous than office whistleblowing, because you're hitting systems, not just individuals. Damned is the society that neglects the voice of the macro-whistleblowers, or does not possess the capacity to discern the seeds of prophecy. Macro-whistleblowers sail against the wind. What this says to us is that prophets often see what those around them do not see. Whistleblowing is not limited to organizational misconduct like corruption in a company or fraud in a government department. That's just one domain of it, commonly formalized in legal protections. But the broader moral and civic scope of whistleblowing includes whistleblowing as a civic act, exposing how a government deliberately disempowers citizens, e.g., through economic policies, cadre deployment, manipulation of public opinion, hidden state-sponsored violence such as assassinations or political killings, media censorship, suppression of truth, or ideological indoctrination, education system failure designed to maintain dependency and ignorance. It is bearing witness to large-scale injustice, often at great personal or reputational risk. Despite its urgency, macro-whistleblowing remains an undeveloped, often misunderstood field. It has no formal textbooks, no institutions training it, no recognition in law or public policy. It lives in the shadows, practiced by the brave and the observant, those who piece together the patterns of betrayal embedded in national life. While organizational whistleblowing is protected, professionalized, and largely reactive, macro-whistleblowing is dangerous, philosophical, and prophetic. It is not concerned with single events, but with systemic design, with how a government or ideology subtly crushes the soul of a people while claiming to liberate them. Rebuttal. This is not investigative journalism. We must make one thing clear. Macro-whistleblowing is not investigative journalism. Journalism reports on what happened. Macro-whistleblowing reveals why it keeps happening. Journalists uncover facts. Macro-whistleblowers uncover systems. Journalism may expose a corrupt official. Macro-whistleblowing exposes the machinery that produces corruption, normalizes failure, and sustains injustice through laws, ideologies, and institutions that appear legitimate on the surface. This is not about scoops or headlines. It is about civic warning, moral resistance, and national reawakening. We are the pioneers of a necessary field. If it sounds unfamiliar, that's because it is new. Or rather, it is ancient work now returning. The work once done by prophets, truth-tellers, and revolutionaries before modern bureaucracies and media monopolies tamed dissent. We are pioneers, and we say with clarity, this field deserves recognition. This work must be protected. This truth must be heard. Macro-whistleblowing is not a career. It is a calling, and the times demand that more rise to answer it. Position paper. 1. What is macro-whistleblowing? A new field is born. Introduction. The lie is not a glitch. It's the operating system. In every broken society, a few brave souls eventually stop asking, who stole the money? And begin asking the far more dangerous question, who designed the system to keep us poor, blind, and manageable? That moment marks the birth of macro-whistleblowing. This is not a career path. This is not protected by policy. This is not taught at journalism schools. It is a field without a name, a practice without a paycheck. Until now, we name it macro-whistleblowing, and we declare it is real, it is necessary, and it has begun. The definition: beyond the building, into the nation. Macro-whistleblowing is the act of exposing how systems, ideologies, and state machinery, not just individuals, have been designed or allowed to operate in ways that disempower the public, manufacture mass dependency, erase truth from memory, and maintain elite control under the illusion of democracy or transformation. Whereas conventional whistleblowing alerts us to fraud in a department, macro-whistleblowing confronts fraud in the national story. It points the finger not at one minister, but at the architecture of control itself. Why the world needed a name for this. Those who expose systemic collapse are often mislabeled conspiracy theorists by officials, radicals by media, sellouts by ideologues, ungrateful by the public. But all they are doing is noticing patterns others refuse to see. They are mapping betrayal, not out of bitterness, but out of a higher duty to truth. By refusing to stay inside the box of organizational guilt, they ask, why are our schools worse now, not better? Why is poverty deepening after decades of empowerment? Why do elections change faces, but not outcomes? Who keeps memory hostage? These are not journalistic curiosities. They are macro-revelations. What macro-whistleblowers do? They expose the lie behind the law, track the poison in the policy, interpret the real message behind government slogans, show how progress is paraded while regression is engineered. They use books, essays, and YouTube platforms, history, economics, philosophy, theology, memoir, testimony, and data. And most importantly, moral clarity. Macro-whistleblowers don't need leaks, they need sight. Why this field has been neglected. It can't be institutionalized. The system cannot train people to question its own foundations. It lacks short-term rewards. There are no awards for truth that embarrasses power. It operates in the gray zone between journalism, philosophy, history, and civic duty. It is dangerous. People who do it lose jobs, get threatened, or are labeled mentally unstable. And yet, every nation in crisis depends on it. This is a call to found. A field macro-whistleblowing deserves academic recognition as a field of ethical and political inquiry, public education campaigns to teach it as a civic right, global communities of practice where whistleblowers can support each other, public archiving of documents, stories, and testimonies that expose systemic failure. We need to create handbooks, manifestos, training modules, and platforms of protection. This work is not new, but until now, it had no name. Conclusion: this is the highest form of patriotism. Macro-whistleblowers do not hate their country. They love it so much. They cannot lie about its wounds. They are not trying to burn the house down. They are trying to expose the fire already inside the walls. This is a new field, but it is also the oldest form of loyalty. Let us now give it structure. Let us now give it voice. Let us found the field of macro-whistleblowing. Position paper. 2. This is not journalism. It's systemic revelation. Introduction. Journalism explains events. Macro-whistleblowing reveals design. The moment someone publishes uncomfortable truths about power, they're quickly lumped in with journalists. Oh, you're investigating corruption. No, this is not that. This is not a scoop. This is not a report. This is systemic revelation, and it must be separated from journalism once and for all. Macro-whistleblowing is not about events. It's about patterns. It's not reactive. It's diagnostic. It's not asking what happened, but how the machine is built to keep happening that way. Why we must separate the two: investigative journalism and macro-whistleblowing. Both serve the public interest, but they operate in different universes. Investigative journalism macro-whistleblowing focuses on events, incidents, scandals, focuses on systems, ideologies, long-term sabotage built on documents, sources, leaks built on insight, philosophy, history, observation, seeks accountability for individuals, seeks exposure of structures and designs, works within the news cycle, works beyond timeframes, writes for the ages, is often constrained by editorial boards. Legality is sovereign, independent, often punished by law. The trap of conflation, when macro-whistleblowers are mislabeled as journalists. They are expected to present evidence where they are, presenting design. They are accused of conspiracy when they are simply showing architecture. Their work is dismissed as opinion, instead of being respected as ideological critique. This forces systemic truth-tellers to operate under the wrong paradigm, constantly having to explain why they're not chasing headlines but revealing the scaffold that built the house of lies. Journalism protects the record. We dissect the record's DNA. Journalists expose who stole the funds in a tender deal. Macro-whistleblowers ask, why is the tender system a weapon of economic sabotage in the first place? Why are cadres rewarded for destroying delivery, not building it? Why is corruption not an abuse of the system but its intended outcome? Journalism preserves facts. Macro-whistleblowing translates facts into meaning. We are interpreters of betrayal. Why journalism can't go far enough. Journalism, especially mainstream, is often owned by oligarchs or captured by state influence, constrained by balance, objectivity, and neutrality, timid in confronting ideology, especially sacred cows like transformation, equality, or national healing. Macro-whistleblowing has no such leash. It can say, the policy itself is a lie. The liberation was hijacked. The slogans are tools of paralysis. Your democracy is a costume party hosted by wolves. That's not journalism. That's a civic exorcism. The work of systemic revelation, macro-whistleblowers write. Books that reinterpret history without the propaganda essays that decode political language into psychological submission. speeches that break illusion citizens. We're taught to call freedom series that track the decay of a nation not from its headline crimes, but its accepted failures. We use critical thinking, pattern analysis, personal risk, and above all, a commitment to truth over applause. Conclusion: journalists will tell you what happened. We tell you why you're still poor. The nation doesn't need more scandal chasers. It needs more system readers. We are not rivals of journalists. We are the next layer. After the article is written, the macro-whistleblower steps forward and says, "Now let me show you why this isn't a mistake. It's a system, a design, a doctrine, a machine built to extract your wealth, memory, and future while feeding you slogans." We do not fit in the newsroom. We operate in the street, in the silence, in the underground, until the lie falls. In an era where censorship wears a democratic face and propaganda speaks the language of progress, a new kind of truth teller is rising: the macro-whistleblower. They are not leaking documents. They are exposing systems. They are not chasing scandals. They are decoding betrayal. This powerful manifesto defines macro-whistleblowing as the missing profession in modern democracies, one that speaks not from permission, but from conscience. It separates systemic revelation from journalism, defends the role of forbidden memory, and dares to proclaim speech as sovereign, sacred, and unstoppable. Through 5 electrifying position papers, this booklet gives voice, structure, and legitimacy to those who expose the machine behind the narrative. If you've ever felt that the lie is not a glitch, but the system itself, this is your field. This is your language. This is your fight. Position paper 3: The State's War on Memory. Why macro-whistleblowers are hunted. Introduction: the most dangerous act is to remember power doesn't only fear rebellion, it fears memory. Because memory, true memory, is dangerous. It shatters illusions, destroys revisionist myths, and exposes how far a nation has fallen from its promises. Macro-whistleblowers are not hunted because they complain. They are hunted because they refuse to forget. They remember the working clinics before liberation, the quality schools before transformation, the moral culture before ideology replaced virtue, the youth who died, the activists who vanished, the honest officials who were assassinated. They remember how things used to be and how they were broken on purpose. This is why macro-whistleblowers are marked, because they become walking archives in a society built to forget. The system must erase memory to survive. Every ideological regime, whether communist, nationalist, revolutionary, or technocratic, must do 3 things to sustain itself: rewrite the past, control the present narrative, deny all alternatives for the future. This is not accidental, it is strategic. The war on memory is as important as any war on opposition. To keep citizens docile, the system must call poverty progress, call dependency empowerment, call decay liberation. To achieve this, it destroys records, censors speech, rebrands failures, exiles or kills those who remember. The role of the macro-whistleblower. In this war, macro-whistleblowers are custodians of forbidden memory. They keep the memory of true education standards before state decay, the memory of peaceful communities before political mafias took root, the memory of whistleblowers who were gunned down and buried in silence, the memory of economic systems that once worked before they were nationalized into paralysis. They gather, preserve, and publish these truths, not to romanticize the past, but to dismantle the lie that there was never another way. Why the state must silence them. Governments and ideological movements fear macro-whistleblowers because they ruin the myth of progress. They challenge the national script. They threaten the usefulness of propaganda. They expose complicity in betrayal. To silence them, the state uses character assassination. They're bitter, racist, counter-revolutionary, unpatriotic. Legal intimidation, state capture of courts and tribunals, surveillance and watchlisting assassination, especially in developing states where power is unchecked. You are not just exposing wrongdoing. You are interrupting the architecture of historical control. The state's memory erasure techniques. Educational capture. Curriculum is rewritten to glorify the ruling party. Real heroes are replaced with ideological symbols. Entire generations are trained in selective amnesia media control. Funding and favors are given to loyal outlets. Investigative reporting is stifled or co-opted. Real history is never televised. Only spectacle hero replacement and manufactured icons. Prophets, scholars, and saints are replaced by party cadres and celebrities. The wise are forgotten. The loyal are worshipped deliberate noise and entertainment. Distract the population with sport, scandal, celebrity, and fake debates, so that they never remember what's missing. Macro-whistleblowing is a form of national archiving. The macro-whistleblower is not just an exposer. They are an archivist of truth, gathering suppressed testimonies, publishing underground knowledge, recording erased names, resurrecting realities. They remember on behalf of the people, because the system wants the people to remember only what it allows. Conclusion. In the war on memory, silence is treason. The state wages war on memory because memory leads to consciousness, and consciousness leads to resistance. This is why macro-whistleblowers must keep speaking, writing, and preserving what others are forced to forget. We are not enemies of the state. We are enemies of the state of forgetting. Let the world know. You can erase documents. You can rewrite the textbooks. You can burn archives. But as long as even one macro-whistleblower remembers, your lie will never be safe. Position paper. For sovereign, speech in the age of fear introduction. You are allowed to speak. As long as you say nothing. We live in an age of artificial freedom. You may speak, but not too sharply. You may post, but not too truthfully. You may think, but not out loud. This is the new unspoken rule of modern democracies infected by ideological control. Speak all you want, as long as your words don't disrupt the system. But macro-whistleblowers refuse this leash. They practice a deeper, older freedom, sovereign speech, not granted by governments, parties, or laws, but by the inner court of conscience. And that is what makes them dangerous. What is sovereign speech? Sovereign speech is rooted in personal conscience, not institutional permission. Immune to censorship because it answers to truth, not approval. Unshackled from media trends, political loyalty, or safe narratives. It is the kind of speech that doesn't wait for evidence from a press conference because it already sees the architecture of betrayal. It is sight-speaking, not data chasing. It is speech that says what everyone suspects, but few dare to say. Macro-whistleblowers speak not because they are brave, but because they are no longer enslaved by fear. Why the age of fear is so effective. Today's fear doesn't arrive with jackboots or prison cells, though those still exist. It arrives in more polite modern forms. Job insecurity. Speak out, and your career quietly ends. Social exclusion. Say what is unpopular, and you're cast as a pariah. Legal persecution. Truth becomes hate speech or defamation. Algorithmic burial. Your voice is not silenced. It's simply made invisible. These are not tools of censorship. These are tools of psychological submission. The average citizen learns to whisper. The macro-whistleblower learns to roar. The difference between legal freedom and inner freedom governments brag about freedom of speech, while killing whistleblowers in silence, funding only friendly media, weaponizing defamation laws, canceling, discrediting, or deplatforming truth tellers. But true sovereign speech cannot be revoked because it does not beg for permission. It does not bend to popularity. It does not ask, will this be liked? Only, is this true? Macro-whistleblowers operate from the undefeated territory of the soul. Who practices sovereign speech? The grassroots writer exposing the ideological trap behind economic policy. The citizen researcher publishing long-form essays outside academic journals. The historian restoring erased truths about a nation's foundations. The YouTuber decoding the psychological warfare of slogans, symbols, and spin. The exile who speaks from memory, not mandate. These people are not influencers. They are liberated voices, untied from the system's rewards. The price of sovereign speech, it is not cheap. You may lose career advancement. You may be labeled unstable, unpatriotic, or extreme. You may be watched, flagged, shadow banned. You may even lose your life, but you gain something greater: a clean conscience and an uncaged tongue. You become what dictators fear most: a person who cannot be bought, bullied, or silenced. Why? This speech must survive without sovereign speech. The nation drowns in slogans. The truth is sterilized and edited. Fear becomes the national anthem. The people forget what it feels like to say what they know. And without macro-whistleblowers, there is no oxygen in public discourse. There are only scripts, claps, and controlled outrage. We are not here to be liked. We are here to speak what must be said, and let the silence fall where it may. Conclusion: the voice that cannot be colonized. In this age of fear, sovereign speech is resistance. It is not polite. It is not marketable. It is not career savvy. But it is human, and it is holy. Macro-whistleblowers carry a burden the state cannot cancel. They are not trying to go viral. They are trying to keep the soul of the nation alive. And that requires speech that is untamed, unbought, and unbroken. We do not ask for a microphone. We take the floor. Macro-whistleblowing is the emerging field of public truth-telling that exposes not individual corruption, but systemic betrayal. It is not a form of journalism. It is not confined to organizations. It is the work of sovereign citizens who diagnose how policies, ideologies, and governance systems are deliberately designed to disempower the public. This digital booklet offers the foundational framework for a field that has been silenced, misnamed, and dismissed for too long. Position paper: 5 case studies in macro-whistleblowing South Africa. Unmasking liberation as entrapment. Macro-whistleblowing in South Africa is the act of exposing how a post-apartheid government, once hailed as liberators, turned systemic failure into national policy. These whistleblowers do not target one department or leader. They reveal how poverty, decay, and dependency are deliberately maintained. Macro truths exposed. Cadre deployment as a system for destroying competence and entrenching loyalty. BE. Policies not as empowerment, but as economic sabotage to control opportunity access. The education system as a soft weapon, deliberately weakened to create compliant voters, not critical thinkers. Political killings as normalized instruments of fear and silence. Macro-whistleblowers here are journalists turned historians, civil servants turned prophets, and citizens who use books, podcasts, and YouTube to say what no party will admit. Liberation was hijacked, and the people were re-enslaved through ideology. China. Dissent under a surveillance state. In China, macro-whistleblowing means speaking the truth about totalitarian software. Not just internet censorship or party corruption, but the algorithmic rewriting of society. It is almost always anonymous. It is often exiled. Sometimes it ends in prison or disappearance. Macro truths exposed. The harmonious society rhetoric as code for mind control and obedience. The social credit system as a behavior engineering mechanism to erase dissent before it begins. Rewriting of history, e.g., Tiananmen, Tibet, Hong Kong, to manufacture loyalty and eliminate historical memory. Suppression of ethnic identity, e.g., Uyghurs, Falun Gong, to enforce ideological sameness. Chinese macro whistleblowers often publish under pseudonyms, leak to overseas platforms, or encode truths into art, code, or satire. In China, macro whistleblowing is not just illegal. It is defined as treasonous thought. Post-Soviet states, from revolutionary promises to oligarchic systems, in Russia and the former Soviet sphere, macro whistleblowers speak out against the illusion of transformation. They expose how power passed not to the people, but to a permanent ruling class, from commissars to billionaires. Macro truths exposed. State media's role in maintaining war, paranoia, and strongman mythology. The deep state inheritance of Soviet-style suppression behind capitalist facades. Historical revisionism used to glorify empire and silence dissent. The poisoning of dissidents, Navalny, Litvinenko, not as rare events, but as policy signals. Writers, historians, and exiled thinkers are the front line of macro whistleblowing here. Their books are banned. Their platforms are hacked. Their names are blacklisted. Their truth is, the Soviet state never died. It simply changed costumes. Iran. Theology as a cage. Macro whistleblowers in Iran expose a system where religion is not faith, but total control. They speak not just against laws, but the divine justification for human bondage. Macro truths exposed. Theocracy as authoritarianism, clothed in divine language. Women's oppression as both spiritual doctrine and state engineering. Suppression of culture, poetry, art, music, to kill imagination and future. Surveillance of conscience. Your inner thoughts policed through community informants and morality patrols. In Iran, macro whistleblowing can mean exile, execution, or erasure from history. Many speak from abroad, publishing memoirs, translating banned texts, or giving voice to the voiceless within. North Korea, the machinery of total oblivion. There is no country where macro whistleblowing is more dangerous or more needed than North Korea. Here, truth is outlawed. History is fiction. The people are not just controlled, they are reprogrammed. Macro truths when they escape. The Kim dynasty as a divine cult designed to replace reality. The absence of time itself. Citizens cannot form memory as the state controls even the calendar. Propaganda villages, fake cities, and forced happiness to maintain illusion. Internal collapse as a permanent feature hidden behind border security. The few macro whistleblowers who escape often break their silence from Seoul or foreign capitals, using documentaries, interviews, or books. Their stories are precious because inside North Korea, the field of macro whistleblowing is a death sentence. Conclusion: the global field has always existed, we just haven't named it. These case studies prove that macro whistleblowing is not theoretical. It is global. It is practiced in every nation where systems are designed to manufacture decay, rewrite history, or silence sovereignty. Wherever the state turns memory into a weapon, replaces freedom with fear, and masks betrayal with language, there you will find a macro whistleblower, alone or underground, breaking the silence on behalf of a sleeping nation. This is the field. This is the war. This is the truth. Before we can build, we must expose what's broken people's capitalism is, the economic future rooted in sovereignty, self-reliance, and local wealth creation. But it cannot take root in soil poisoned by lies. Before we plant the seeds of prosperity, we must first clear the land of ideological rot. That is the function of macro whistleblowing in the economic domain. To expose the systemic sabotage that keeps the masses trapped in dependency while pretending to uplift them. False economics. The ideological trap in countries like South Africa and across the global South, governments preach transformation while engineering economic paralysis by policy. Macro whistleblowers expose Black economic empowerment, BEE, not as empowerment, but as elite, gatekeeping cadre deployment. Not as strategic placement, but as the destruction of competence land expropriation rhetoric. Not as justice, but as a smokescreen for investor flight and poverty tenderpreneurship. Not as entrepreneurship, but as institutionalized looting slogan-based economics that mask permanent underdevelopment. These are not failures. They are features of the system, and macro whistleblowing exists to decode them. How macro whistleblowing serves people's capitalism. People's capitalism begins with cleared minds and opened eyes. It breaks the spell of dependency. Macro whistleblowing shows that the state has no interest in your financial freedom. The education system was designed to produce compliant workers, not builders. Free services are not kindness. They are shackles. Only after this is revealed can people embrace ownership, local production, and community enterprise. DENS restores public belief in initiative. Macro whistleblowers give names, examples, and case studies of systems that once worked. Township economies that flourished before state interference. Black entrepreneurs who built empires under far harsher regimes. Community models that operated on trust, trade, and craftsmanship, not ideology. This is not nostalgia. This is blueprint. DORS. It dismantles the fear of risk and success. Where ideologies preach safety and equality, macro whistleblowers preach, you were made to rise, not to wait. They teach that inequality of outcome is natural, and that earned success is not exploitation. It's the reward for contribution. Economic literacy as macro whistleblowing. In many countries, economic illiteracy is state policy. It keeps the population in endless waiting rooms, waiting for grants, waiting for jobs, waiting for handouts, waiting for radical economic transformation. People's capitalism, supported by macro whistleblowers, says, stop waiting, start working, start owning. To do this, macro whistleblowers must translate economic policies into street-level consequences, reveal the ghost networks behind fake job creation, show how inflation, taxation, and currency controls are used to limit mobility. The macro whistleblower as economic reformer. They are not economists in suits. They are former civil servants who expose fake procurement pipelines, entrepreneurs who document how bureaucracy crushes township trade, teachers who show how financial ignorance is taught as compliance, cultural critics who reveal how envy and victimhood are weaponized against self-reliance. These voices form the cultural resistance wing of people's capitalism. Macro whistleblowing is not the prosperity movement. It is the bulldozer that clears the lies. Without it, the slogans continue. The people remain hypnotized. The grassroots economy never rises. With it, the masks fall. The citizens awaken. The blueprint for people's capitalism becomes not just possible, but necessary. This is why macro whistleblowing is the companion, foundation, and gatekeeper of people's capitalism. It exposes what the state built to keep you small, so you can build what makes you free. Macro whistleblowing and people's capitalism. Clearing the ground for economic truth and civic renewal. Introduction. Before we can build, we must expose what's broken. People's capitalism is the economic future rooted in sovereignty, self-reliance, and local wealth creation. But it cannot take root in soil poisoned by lies. Before we plant the seeds of prosperity, we must first clear the land of ideological rot. That is the function of macro whistleblowing in the economic domain, to expose the systemic sabotage that keeps the masses trapped in dependency while pretending to uplift them. False economics. The ideological trap in countries like South Africa and across the global South. Governments preach transformation while engineering economic paralysis by policy. Macro-whistleblowers expose Black economic empowerment, BEE, not as empowerment, but as elite. Gatekeeping cadre deployment, not as strategic placement, but as the destruction of competence. Land expropriation rhetoric, not as justice, but as a smokescreen for investor flight and poverty. Tenderpreneurship, not as entrepreneurship, but as institutionalized looting slogan-based economics that mask permanent underdevelopment. These are not failures. They are features of the system, and macro-whistleblowing exists to decode them. How macro-whistleblowing serves people's capitalism. People's capitalism begins with cleared minds and opened eyes. It breaks the spell of dependency. Macro-whistleblowing shows that the state has no interest in your financial freedom. The education system was designed to produce compliant workers, not builders. Free services are not kindness. They are shackles. Only after this is revealed can people embrace ownership, local production, and community enterprise. It restores public belief in initiative. Macro-whistleblowers give names, examples, and case studies of systems that once worked, township economies that flourished before state interference, Black entrepreneurs who built empires under far harsher regimes, community models that operated on trust, trade, and craftsmanship, not ideology. This is not nostalgia. This is blueprint. It dismantles the fear of risk and success. Where ideologies preach safety and equality, macro-whistleblowers preach, you were made to rise, not to wait. They teach that inequality of outcome is natural and that earned success is not exploitation. It's the reward for contribution. Economic literacy. As macro-whistleblowing, in many countries, economic illiteracy is state policy. It keeps the population in endless waiting rooms, waiting for grants, waiting for jobs, waiting for handouts, waiting for radical economic transformation. People's capitalism, supported by macro-whistleblowers, says, stop waiting. Start working. Start owning. To do this, macro-whistleblowers must translate economic policies into street-level consequences, reveal the ghost networks behind fake job creation, show how inflation, taxation, and currency controls are used to limit mobility. The macro-whistleblower. As economic reformer, they are not economists in suits. They are former civil servants who expose fake procurement pipelines, entrepreneurs who document how bureaucracy crushes township trade, teachers who show how financial ignorance is taught as compliance, cultural critics who reveal how envy and victimhood are weaponized against self-reliance. These voices form the cultural resistance wing of people's capitalism. Conclusion: clearing the soil for the people's prosperity. Code macro-whistleblowing is not the prosperity movement. It is the bulldozer that clears the lies. Without it, the slogans continue. The people remain hypnotized. The grassroots economy never rises. With it, the masks fall. The citizens awaken. The blueprint for people's capitalism becomes not just possible, but necessary. This is why macro-whistleblowing is the companion, foundation, and gatekeeper of people's capitalism. It exposes what the state built to keep you small, so you can build what makes you free. Final manifesto. Statement: we declare the profession of macro-whistleblowing open. Let it be known. We no longer ask permission to speak. We no longer wait for the media to investigate. We no longer sit in silence while systems eat the souls of nations. We now speak as macro-whistleblowers, not from titles, but from truth. Not to expose a man, but to dismantle the machine. Not to shock, but to awaken. We declare that truth is not a career. It is a duty. Speech is not granted by the state. It is sovereign by birth. Memory is not nostalgia. It is resistance. Whistleblowing is not limited to documents. It includes design, doctrine, and destiny. This is the new frontier of democratic survival, to expose the architecture of betrayal before it buries the people. We call on writers, historians, and thinkers to name the systems behind the slogans, civil servants and educators to reveal the decay hidden behind policy, creators, podcasters, and citizen publishers to document what the media fears to touch, communities and platforms to protect, support, and amplify these voices. We no longer accept poverty as progress. We no longer confuse decay with transformation. We no longer wear silence like a virtue. We do not whisper. We do not comply. We do not forget. We are macro-whistleblowing. We are the memory. We are the message. Let history record that we spoke. South Africa is not suffering from mismanagement. It is suffering from design. The crisis is not accidental. It is intentional architecture, wrapped in the language of liberation, equality, and transformation. What the media calls failure is in fact ideologically planned stagnation. This is why macro-whistleblowing is not just needed, it is urgent. In South Africa, macro-whistleblowing means exposing how an entire democratic dream was hijacked. Not by outsiders, but from within. Macro-whistleblowing in South Africa. What it exposes. 1. Cadre deployment as state capture by design. It was never about skill. It was always about loyalty over competence. Macro-whistleblowers reveal how state institutions were intentionally hollowed out to serve political networks. How unqualified appointees were placed not to build, but to control and collapse. That cadre deployment was not a strategy. It was a virus embedded in the Constitution by post-liberation power. 2. The weaponization of poverty. Poverty is not a policy failure. It is a control mechanism. The free services keep citizens dependent, passive, and grateful. Education is dumbed down to suppress critical thought. Economic freedom is denied through red tape, tax abuse, and land rhetoric with no real intention of release. Macro-whistleblowers decode the trap, keep them poor. Call it transformation. Feed them just enough to clap. 3. The hijacking of history. The struggle narrative has become a smokescreen. Real heroes replaced with loyalists. The Christian, ethical foundation of the ANC erased. The Freedom Charter weaponized to justify state control, not citizen freedom. Macro-whistleblowing restores the historical record. The ANC that exists today is not the ANC that fought apartheid. It is its own betrayal. 4. Political assassination. As a normal governance tool in municipalities and provinces, the bullet now speaks before the ballot. Whistleblowers like Sindiso Magaka and Babita Deokaran were not killed by criminals. They were eliminated by the system they tried to expose. The state no longer investigates murder if the motive is political. It hides. Macro-whistleblowers name the pattern. Speak up, and the system buries you. In silence or in soil. The role of macro-whistleblowing in national survival in South Africa. Macro-whistleblowing is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of rescue. It rescues truth from ideological noise, memory from manipulated history, freedom from fake liberation, entrepreneurship from bureaucratic sabotage, hope from the chains of helplessness. It tells the people, you are not lazy. You are being deliberately locked out. You are not free. You are being managed under the banner of freedom. Tools of the South African macro-whistleblower books that expose economic sabotage as systemic policy. YouTube channels that document assassinations, corruption networks, and ideological decay. Educational platforms that reteach real South African history. Pre-ANC propaganda street journalism that shows how crime, poverty, and unemployment are not crises. They are assets to the ruling elite. This is the front line of the war for the soul of the nation. South Africa is not a failed state. It is a state captured by an ideology that fears independence, hates excellence, and rewards loyalty over results. Macro-whistleblowing is the only remaining voice capable of naming the betrayal, protecting the record, and waking the people. This is not commentary. This is not opposition. This is national defense through truth. Let it be known, South Africa will not be saved by slogans, but by those who tear the mask off the system and show the people what was done in their name. This is macro-whistleblowing, and this is its battlefield.
This is not a scene from a mob movie. This is a government offices in South Africa, where tenders don't just decide who gets the job. They decide who lives and who dies. If you are loyal to the network, you get the tender. If you speak out against the theft, you get the bullet. This is not a metaphor. Let me show you. Here is a courtroom confession of a man who killed Sindiso Magatai. This is a confession soaked in blood. Man tried to stand up. He believed truth still had a place in our broken nation. His name was Sindiso Magata. He was a counsellor, a reformer, a young man who thought fighting for honesty was worth it. But in South Africa, truth is not rewarded. It's assassinated. The killers have confessed. They were sent by a mayor, by a municipal manager, by a network of greed that lives inside government halls. They were armed by the police, escorted by intelligence officers who paid in cash. They were promised 120,000 rands for the kill, and a 1 million rands tender as a thank you. All this to silence a man who spoke too soon, spoke too boldly. Sindiso Magata didn't die in a car crash. He didn't fall sick. He was executed. His car was watched. His house was mapped. His photograph was passed between killers like a blueprint. They waited. They followed. And they fired. The trigger was pulled with an AK-47, not stolen, issued from the very people paid to protect us. That's what this series is about, the invisible war on truth. And the price of exposing the rot. This is not a documentary. This is evidence. A country that silences the honest does not deserve silence in return. And this is the testimony they never wanted heard. Can you believe it? The killers were shown his house, given his photo, given a state-issued AK-47 that escorted by police intelligence who were in on the hit. They were told, "Do not worry, the road is covered. The cops are with us." And when Magaka was gunned down in broad daylight, they were paid 120,000 rands in cash, then promised a tender worth 1 million rands. What does this confession tell us? It tells us South Africa is not dying from poverty. It is being murdered by betrayal. The poor are not poor because of lack. They are poor because those in power feed on them like vultures. This system does not reform. It eliminates. It does not listen. It silences. It does not serve. It feeds on blood. This is not a war zone, but people are dying like it is. We now move from KwaZulu-Natal to Limpopo, to a municipality called Mogalakwena, place where public money is looted in broad daylight, and those who speak out are shot dead right in the center of town. Voltienkakana was a councillor. Ralph Kanyeni was a community leader. Both men believed in standing up for what's right. Both men were working together to uncover corruption. Both were assassinated in broad daylight while sitting inside a car. No warning, no protection, just bullets and silence. What were they exposing? Tenders awarded without process. Millions siphoned off to cronies. Public funds meant for water, clinics, roads, gone. When they asked questions, they were told to back off. When they refused, they were killed. The price of truth. 2 lives, 1 car. Broad daylight, middle of town. No arrest. No convictions. Just cold blood on hot tar. And a whisper among officials. This is what happens when you expose the comrades. Understand this pattern magaka, in KwaZulu, Natal-Valtinkakana, and Ralph Kanyani in Limpopo, Babita Deokaran and Gauteng, hundreds more across the country. The story is always the same. Expose corruption. And you're marked. Ask questions. Ijor. And you're erased. Fight for the people. And you get a bullet, not a bonus. This is no longer misgovernance. It is terrorism by officials. This is not politics. This is not maladministration. This is political terrorism. The state is at war with its own truth-tellers. But these are not just stories. They are evidence. Evidence for South Africa has become a nation where truth is fatal and silence is rewarded. You have a voice, you have a vote, and you have a choice. To keep pretending this is democracy, or to rise and dismantle this bloody machinery, the anatomy of a weaponized tender first, a public service, water, electricity, school books, is deliberately sabotaged. Then a tender is issued to fix it. The tender goes to a comrade's cousin, uncle, or shell company. Money is drained. The service is never delivered. And when someone dares raise the alarm, they die. Because now the tender system isn't just theft. It's state-sponsored murder for profit. Tender as reward, bullet as punishment. Welcome to the tender hitmen pipeline, where political connections hand out contracts, and those contracts create killers. Remember Sindiso Magata? His killers were promised a 1 million rands tender as payment for the hit. Let that sink in. A government tender, not used to build, but used to pay for an assassination. The Kashend, poor stay poor. The tenders go to ghost companies. The roads remain broken. But a few comrades get rich. And the dead pile up in silence. The ANC doesn't just steal, it kills to keep stealing. When your child drinks brown water, dirty water, when your clinic has no medicine, when your township floods every year, you must know the money was not lost, it was redirected into tenders, into hitmen, into silence. Here are young men in townships, hungry, angry, unemployed. They are recruited by ANC comrades not for work, but for eliminations. A competitor? Take them out. A whistleblower? Silence them. A councillor asking questions? Make them disappear. These young men are promised tenders in return. First a hit, then a contract. That's the pipeline. Politicians know this. They created it. You think a hitman from Umlazi just decides to shoot a municipal manager? No. He is sent. He is funded. He is protected by people in suits with state-issued phones, driving government vehicles, these are not lone wolves. These are dogs fed by the state, tenders for blood, case studies. In Mogalaguena, a councillor and a community leader were gunned down in the middle of town. In Umzimkhulu, Sindiso Magata was assassinated. The killers were promised a tender worth 1 million rands. In Johannesburg, Babita Deokaran was shot outside her home after exposing PPE tender corruption. What do they all have in common? The killer got the cash, the honest one got the coffin. It's a network, not an exception. The killers are hired, the police are bought, the prosecutors stall, the ministers keep quiet. The system works like a cartel. But instead of drug routes, it's budget line items. Instead of turf wars, it's tender wars. Instead of justice, it's a cycle of payoffs and executions. If you don't understand this, you will be the next victim. You're not safe just because you stay silent. The ANC mafia state doesn't just kill whistleblowers. It kills truth, accountability, competition, and eventually the country. Ask yourself, why is the township still flooded every summer? Why are RDP houses collapsing? Why is every clinic out of stock? Because the money meant for development was diverted into Hiti jobs. This is the lived reality in provinces like KZN, Limpopo, Northwest, Gauteng, Mpumalanga. Tenders fund assassinations, and assassinations secure tenders. It is a closed pipeline run by comrades filled with blood and oiled by silence. Speak out, and they'll call you mad. Stay silent, and you become their accomplice. The only way to stop the tender hitmen pipeline is to destroy the network that built it. Now let us talk about fake invoices, real blood, the ghost companies behind state assassinations. A ghost company is a fake entity, a name on paper with no staff, no office, no phone number. But it gets paid millions by government departments. Why? Because the people behind these fake companies sit in government themselves, or are connected to those who do. And what do they use the money for? To buy silence, to pay hitmen, to destroy evidence, to shut down investigations. Blood behind the balance sheet. This isn't guesswork. This is how it works. A whistleblower raises concerns about irregular tenders. The procurement officer or manager delays, denies, or disappears. A ghost company is paid 10 million rands for consulting. 20,000 rands is withdrawn in cash, the same amount paid to Magata's killers. The Idua hit goes out. The paperwork is clean. The person is gone. This is the back office of assassination, the tools of the ghost syndicate, tender codes, assigned to companies with no track record. Shell names, 1 director, 5 closed corporations, all in his grandmother's shack. Front women, used to tick the BEE box, never seen again. Disappearing money, traced to luxury watches, AK-47s and getaway cars. And here's the killer part. These companies still receive clean audits because the system checks paperwork, not people. This is how the ANC funds its war against the truth. While the public waits for textbooks, the ghosts get paid. While hospitals run out of medicine, the hitmen run their rounds. While activists are buried, the comrades smile in Dubai. This is not poor governance. This is engineered destruction. Ghost companies are not accidents. They are part of the machine. Why does it matter? Because every time you hear 300 million rands disappeared. You need to ask, who died for that money? Because some of that money didn't disappear. It paid for funerals, for bribes, for bullets, and the people who signed off on it still sit in municipal chairs, national offices, and parliament seats. Smiling, untouchable, and soaked in blood, this country is not just being stolen. It's being murdered, and ghost companies are the assassin's bank account. When your child has no water at school, remember this. When your mother is sent home with no medication, remember this. When the next counsellor is gunned down, remember this. Fake invoices, real blood. The killers of Sindiso Magaka were told, "Do not worry, the cops are with us."